Imagine going to a house to inspect it. And as you do so, you see a small fracture in a wall. As you examine it closer, you discover that the fracture reveals problems with the structural studs. What do? Do you keep investigating to see if the structure of the building was compromised? But if you do that, you'll make a lot of mess. You'll slow down the entire project. So do you tear everything down until you find the root problem? Or do you cover it to keep the appearance of a somewhat normal house? I think we all agree that when it comes to buildings like that, it's very important to go and find the root problem so that the structure won't compromise the entire house. But when it comes to our spiritual lives, sometimes we overlook fractures in our character or in the community's behavior because we don't want to lose the appearances. One such overlooked sin or fracture is slander and all its cousins. If on our end we sometimes overlook and even downplay the sin of hurtful speech, James sets an alternative example. James saw that people in his community were struggling with this. And so instead of covering it up, he chose to present the problem in all its hideousness so that they can understand the gravity of the problem. And what James finds should jolt us out of our seats. More importantly, should jolt us out of our sin. So tonight I would like to invite you to join me as we consider James chapter 3, and I invite you to stand. We'll be reading James chapter 3 from verse 1 all the way to verse 12. The text says, "Do not become teachers in large numbers, my brothers, since you know that we who are teachers will incur a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to rein in the whole body as well. Now, if we put the bits into the horses' mouths so that they will obey us, we direct their whole body as well. Look at the ships too. Though they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are nevertheless directed by a very small rudder, wherever the inclination of the pilot determines. So also the tongue is a small part of the body, and yet it boasts of great things. See how great a forest is set aflame by such a small fire." Verse 6, "And the tongue is a fire, the very world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our body's parts as that which defiles the whole body, and sets on fire the course of our life, and is set on fire by hell. For every species of beasts and birds, of reptiles and creatures of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by the human race. But no one among mankind can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who have been made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come both blessing and cursing. My brothers and sisters, these things should not be this way. Does a spring send out from the same opening both fresh and bitter water? Can a fig tree, my brothers and sisters, bear olives, or a vine bear figs? Nor can salt water produce fresh." Amen. You may be seated. To consider the topic for tonight, we will ask several questions. First one, what is the origin of harmful speech? Second, why is the untamed tongue so problematic? And I'll attempt to offer 3 responses here. Question number 3. We'll look at more specific situations. The majority criticizes someone based on facts. How should we handle this? Question number 4. How can apparently innocent discussions lead to unintended negative consequences? And to make my case, we will look at a very specific situation. You see a guy and a girl chatting, and everyone suspects or assumes there's something between them. What's wrong with talking about it? Question number 5. What are some practical things we can do to tame the tongue? Having said this, let's look back at the context for the text we read. Now, scholars suggest that James, his community, was affected by conflicts and disagreements because people were fighting for the office of teacher. Now, teachers in James's day would have been influential people because only a few of them could read. As such, a certain authority and prestige was associated with a teaching ministry. So being a teacher in that time was the equivalent of being in a leadership position. But the desires of some was not so much to teach the word of God. Rather, they used the teaching office as an avenue to personal power, to influence, and social status. And in the process of fighting for status and influence, people were slandering and cursing their opposition. I find it somewhat daunting how relevant this text is. If you thought the power struggles in our communities that were confined to our setting and our culture, think again. These challenges transcend cultures and centuries. Just like in James's community, some here are trying to use the ministry as a way to amass personal power. And we should be particularly careful with the people who refuse to serve unless they're publicly recognized as leaders. Some resort to defamation, to personal attacks and gossip, all in an effort to defeat or undermine their opposition. There are some who use slander and gossip as a way to put others down and to elevate themselves, all in the hope that their competition will not get the role they want. Why is she in that role? Don't you know what she did? Why is he in that role? If you knew him the way I do, you wouldn't recommend him for the ministry. Behind such remarks might actually be a desire for status. An actual translation of those remarks is, why is she in that role? Not to elevate myself, but everyone knows I have more experience than she does. I could definitely do a better job. Or, God gave me a musical gift. I don't mean to brag, but I'm better than everyone. A word of caution to those masquerading their desire for power via personal attacks. We see right through you. You don't fool anyone. You might perhaps try to attempt to fool people, but you definitely won't fool God. Coming back to our text, people were fighting for power, and in the process, they resorted to verbal attacks. Instead of cultivating a spirit of cooperation and compassion, they fostered a spirit of envy and conflict in the community. James warns precisely against these types of people, or more narrowly, against the dangers of using our speech as a way to attack others. With this as the background, we can now attempt to answer the first question. What is the origin of harmful speech? What lies behind it? Now, there are various ways of responding or answering this question. Some employ harmful speech because they are insecure. They'll try to hide their flaws by putting others down. Insecure people tend to compare themselves with others. That's why you'll hear things like, people say things like, I have my problems, but at least I'm not like that guy. Or, I really don't know why everyone gives her so much attention. She's so average. Attention seekers. They insult and gossip about people because they crave attention. They want to be in the spotlight, and to them, harmful speech is fair game. People also use destructive words out of jealousy and envy. Surprising to hear of girls being jealous of their friend because she now has a boyfriend. And some girls even spread rumors to make their friend doubt her relationship. All because she's jealous that she's in a relationship while she's still single. Veiled, destructive speech. Sometimes malicious speech has conflict as its source. There's someone you just don't get along with. So you spread rumors about them, hoping to gain an upper hand in the conflict, and you intentionally present only part of the story, which in turn makes the naive people be scandalized and go left and right and say how bad the other party is. And thus you take advantage of the naive people and you turn them into the mouthpieces of those rumors. Now, it is true that insecure, attention-seeking, jealous, and confrontational people might use hurtful words to conceal their true problems. And it is true that malicious speech can come from these things. But if we were to ask James what he thinks about it, he would invite us to dig even deeper than that. James chapter 3 verse 6 reads, "And the tongue is a fire, the very world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our body's parts as that which defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of our life, and is set on fire by hell." So in verse 6, James traces the root of evil, and the phrase "the tongue is set on fire by hell" identifies that origin. Now, the word translated here as hell is Gehenna, which refers to the Gehinnom Valley in south of Jerusalem. Now, this valley was known as a symbol of the center of evil, the stronghold of Satan. Symbolically then, Gehenna refers to the place where the enemy, where the devil resides. The implication in this verse is that Satan himself sets the tongue on fire. So in this context, to say that the tongue is set on fire by hell is essentially the same thing as saying the tongue is set on fire by Satan. So, what is the origin of harmful speech? James is as clear as possible. Satan is the ultimate source. And this is as serious as it gets. But James continues, James chapter 3 verse 8. "No one among mankind can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison." Now, the image James uses here is that of a barely and improperly caged beast, which breaks forth with irrational and destructive power. The arsenal of this beast is deadly venom, intended to kill those touched by it. Now, having understood the origin of harmful speech, the answer to the second question becomes more evident. The second question is, why is the untamed tongue so problematic? I'd like to offer three responses here. The first one has to do with the heart. The second response will look at my relationships with people. And the third one will consider my relationship with God. The heart. James chapter 3 verses 10 all the way through 12. "From the same mouth came both blessing and cursing. My brothers and sisters, these things should not be this way. Does a spring send out from the same opening both fresh and bitter water? Can a fig tree, my brothers and sisters, bear olives, or a vine bear figs? Nor can salt water produce fresh." Another way of saying this is, and I'm quoting Jesus, Matthew chapter 7 verses 17 and 18, "Every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit." Let's also remember Matthew 12:34, which reads, "You offspring of vipers, how can you, being evil, express any good things. And pay attention to the last part of the verse. For the mouth speaks from that which fills the heart. Now, to tie all these verses together, the fruits we bear reveal what's in the heart. According to Jesus, then, our actions and our words reveal our character. A person's speech is a mirror that reflects what's in the heart. Our words are a window into our spiritual life. Do you see it now? The implications of these things are extremely serious. We just saw that Satan is the ultimate source of harmful speech. And now we just saw that our speech comes from the heart. What's the implication? If I use harmful speech, it's because my heart was touched by Satan. As a scholar put it, when our speech demonstrates the capacity to devastate others and even ourselves, our tongues have been bent by the forces of evil. Now, as children of God, we are supposed to preach the gospel, which is the good news. This good news should uplift people, should encourage them, should give them hope. But when I'm always talking about the bad things people do, about the bad things happening around me, I'm quite literally a bearer of bad news, which is the very opposite of sharing or preaching the good news. Unfortunately, it seems to me that some here have a subscription to bad news. You rarely, if ever, hear them saying something good about that person or about the church or about the society or about the country. My friends, being a bearer of bad news, talking only about the bad things in this church, insulting people left and right, gossiping, claiming to have the gift of discernment only to cast all sorts of judgments on people, attacking someone's reputation, all these things are just the outer manifestation of an inner problem. The heart is touched by evil. Let's continue with our second question. Why is my untamed tongue so problematic? We just talked about the heart. But a harmful speech will hurt others. Whenever James speaks of the whole body, he refers to the whole person. You find this in James 3, verses 2 through 6 and 9 and 10. But by extension, the whole body includes the community as well. Imagine there's a big tree over here. We all have our own branch. And we sit on our own branch that supports us. Now, whenever I hurt others through my words, I make a cut into that person's branch. It's not a big cut, I say. I know I wasn't supposed to gossip or talk about this person or situation, but it's not that big of a deal. Look, the cut is not even that deep. But others see me doing this and then join in. They too start talking, and every harmful thing that is being said about that person adds a cut into their branch. Now it's just a matter of time until that branch breaks, until that person falls. But you see, the fall is not caused by a sudden violent blow. The branch breaks as a result of multiple tiny cuts. But the community doesn't see that. The other people in the tree only see the straw that breaks the camel's back. They only hear about the last thing that person experienced. And they even criticize the wounded person. Why are you so sensitive? Why are you so weak and let one personal attack get to you? The reality is, however, that there were a series of cuts that person experienced. What kind of cuts? I will speak plainly. Mean comments followed by, I was joking, or can't you take a joke? Insincere compliments. I like your makeup, but you see that the blend was a fail. Guys making fun of the girl's physique. You might not think it's a big deal, But this kind of poison can infect the mind and the heart of people. For instance, guys make fun of a girl's physique. She hears about it. What do you think will follow? Low self-esteem, anxiety, social isolation, depression. But there's more to it. A guy in the group might secretly like her. But since the boys make fun of that girl, he won't approach her because everyone will look down on him. What other cuts? We've talked about this at youth. Girls rating guys on appearance. The guys will eventually hear about it. And this kind of things can prevent genuine connections from forming. The girls group gave a subpar rating to a guy. But there might be a girl who secretly likes him. Now, even if he approaches her, she won't be very inclined to say yes because of the group judgment. Everyone will talk and say, she's with a guy no other girl likes. And it all started with silly little things. Guys making fun of the girl's physique, the girls rating guys on appearance. And this kind of harmful speech has the potential of undermining someone's future. This is serious business. What other cuts? Spreading rumors, intentionally undermining other people's good ideas out of jealousy, turning someone into a laughing stock, intentionally embarrassing someone in front of others, intentionally sharing private information without consent, intentional misrepresentation of facts, constantly criticizing someone, insulting people, comments intended to marginalize people, racist remarks. A side note here. I think we have a problem with this. Have you heard something of the following? That group of people is lazy. If you understand what I'm talking about, you know that we have a problem with it. If you don't understand it, bless your heart. You don't have to. Don't ask around. But notice that behind this, there's also pride and arrogance. Because we are the standard by which we evaluate others. I digress. Tiny cuts will make someone's branch fall. It will weaken it. And then it breaks. And then the person falls. Look around you. Do you know people who used to come to this church but are no longer here? Tiny cuts. And you don't even feel guilty because you say, I only made a small cut. But the truth is, we cut their branch off. My gossip, your slander, the misrepresentation of events, the gaslighting, the bullying, the mockery, all these cuts put together made them fall from the tree. We cut them off. How is it that someone who was doing just fine ends up in emotional and psychological collapse? Well, the slander and the defamation will cause stress and anxiety. This in turn eats away the self-esteem. And since people cause them to feel that way, they'll start being suspicious of everyone around them. This in turn leads to social isolation, lost friendships, lost connection with the church, depression, and then they disappear. They drift apart. The cuts we make into someone's branch can push them into a downward emotional and spiritual spiral. What to you might seem like a mean, innocent comment, to them might be the trigger that makes their past drama resurface. James 3:5 says, a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. Why is my untamed tongue so problematic? My harmful speech will hurt me as well. Usually people assume that if I say something bad about someone else, it will affect only that person. I beg to differ. Proverbs 18:21. The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. In other words, if I use my words to hurt others, to destroy others, I will also be destroyed in the process. Why is that? Whenever I make a cut into someone else's branch, a cut appears in the branch that supports me. Every single time I misuse my tongue, a cut appears in my branch. Jerry's not here, but I asked for permission. I also asked for permission from Nathan. But I'll give you an example. Jerry is my friend. He comes to me and shares personal details. And he says, keep it for yourself. Don't share it with anyone. A few days later, I meet with Nathan. And I say, Nathan, listen, Jerry shared something with me. He told me not to share it with anyone. But Nathan, I trust you. So I'm just going to say it, but don't say it to anyone else. Let me ask you, in this scenario, what am I telling Nathan about myself? How do I present myself to him? I intentionally broke a promise I made to Jerry. I betrayed his trust. So by sharing with Nathan what Jerry told me in private, I am telling Nathan, I cannot be trusted. Don't trust me. I just shared Jerry's secret. What guarantee will Nathan have I won't do the same thing to him? And so Nathan will naturally lose his trust in me and will want to stay away from me. And that's how my sin will bite me back. There are consequences to our actions and words. You're always gossiping and making fun of people. You casually put labels on them. I don't want to say anything bad about her or about him, and then you proceed to say something bad about him or her. That kind of speech will bite you back. Do you really think people will want to spend time with you? For a while, people might find it amusing to make fun of others. But how long do you think they'll last in such a toxic environment? If I'm always putting others down, godly people will walk away from their friendship with me. Let's say you gossip and mock your former friends. Do you really think your current friends don't notice this? Do you think they don't know it's just a matter of time until you'll talk bad about them just as you're doing it with your former friends? This will turn against you. You will be socially isolated. And then you complain you don't have friends. And then you complain that everyone marginalizes you, that no one likes you. Sin will bite you back. So if people distance themselves from me, I have to ask myself, is it possible that I push them away through my hurtful speech? Well, if I start saying bad things about people left and right, if I intentionally share private details, if I gossip about everyone, why am I so surprised that no one likes me? The cuts I make into someone else's branch will appear in my branch, and it will affect my branch as well. But there's more to this. We asked, why is the untamed tongue so problematic? We talked about the heart. We talked about how that affects other people and how that affects us. Now let's look at how what my words say about my relationship with God. James chapter 3 verse 9 says, with it, that is with the tongue, we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who have been made in the likeness of God. We might have been under the impression that whenever I hurt someone with my words, only my relationship with that person is affected. But James is telling us here that if I intentionally hurt someone with my words, I am essentially hurting someone who bears God's image. And when I do that, I am dishonoring God's creation. And by extension, I am disrespecting God. So it's no longer only about my damaged relationship with that person, because now I am at odds with God Himself. Our relationship with God is inseparably connected with our relationships with people. I cannot claim to love God while I'm hurting His creation. 1 John 4:20 reads, if someone says I love God and yet hates his brother or sister, he or she is a liar. My relationships with others are a reflection of my relationship with God. Another way of saying this is my relationship with God will be visible in my relationships with people. Let's move to the third question. The majority criticizes someone based on facts. How should we deal with this situation? Short answer, people are biased. Imagine you're a journalist in the first century world. You hear about a man named Jesus, and so you travel to Israel to write about him. So you go to the crowds, you interview them, and you ask, what do you say about Jesus? He was a good man, they say, at first. But then we needed a miracle, and Jesus refused to do it. You continue with your interviews, and you talk to the Roman authorities. We found no fault in him, they say. So you honor him, right? No. We crucified him. So the Romans then are saying through their actions that Jesus is so despicable that he deserves a death reserved only for the lowest of the low. But you don't stop here. You talk to the religious people. What do you think of Jesus? Jesus is a sinner. He blasphemes. He's in league with Beelzebub, the prince of demons. He's a troublemaker, one who creates division in our community. He talks bad about the leaders. He thinks he's better than all of us. He breaks the Sabbath. He claims he can forgive sins. He deserves to die. So the religious leaders view Jesus with suspicion, constantly challenging his authority, tirelessly trying to trap him, shamelessly accusing him of blasphemy, and foolishly asking for his crucifixion. So far, we don't get a very positive image of Jesus. If we were to rely only on what these people say about him, we wouldn't get the impression that Jesus was a good person. But surely those closest to him had something better to say about him, right? You interviewed a wider group of disciples. So Jesus empowered you to cast out the demons, right? Yes, that's true. So you follow him all the way to the end, right? No. Jesus was a radical, and so was his teaching. After a while, we couldn't stand it, so we left. So you turn to the 12 disciples. They stay with Jesus for a while, only to abandon him later on. And Peter goes on as far as to say that he never met Jesus, he never knew him. And Judas sells Jesus. The disciples would say, we had hopes from him that he didn't fulfill. All right. Surely his family had good things to say about Jesus, right? Jesus' brothers mocked him. John 7:5, for even his own brothers did not believe in him. Mark 3 verse 21, when his family heard about this, that is Jesus' family, they went to take charge of him, for they said, he, that is Jesus, is out of his mind. His own family. So the crowds, the Roman authorities, the Jewish leaders, the wider group of the disciples, the 12 disciples, even his own family, virtually everyone around him, around Jesus, had at one point or another something bad to say about him. What's missing here? Jesus' perspective, what he has to say about himself, his voice, his version of the story. So if we were to rely on what people around Jesus had to say about him, our understanding of Jesus would be badly distorted, utterly flawed, and painfully misguided. Now, how can we bridge this observation to our topic? When you hear rumors and bad news about someone from every single direction, acquaintances, friends, close friends, leaders, family members, I know it's very tempting to say, well, if everyone judges him that way, it must be true. But if Jesus' case teaches us something, is that we should be very, very slow to judge. If you haven't talked to the person in question, you most definitely don't have the full picture. You see, the crowds were right. Jesus refused to help them. But the crowds won't tell you that Jesus refused to help them because of their unbelief. The religious leaders were half right. Jesus did cause division. He did challenge the leaders. Religious leaders won't tell you, though, that while doing so, he was doing the Lord's will. The disciples were right. Jesus and his teaching was radical. And it's true Jesus didn't fulfill their hopes. But the disciples won't tell you that their hopes conflicted with God's will. So spreading rumors and gossiping does not necessarily imply you invent things. I'm sure you've heard of this, or a variation of this saying, well, that's what happened. It's not like I'm lying. You see, defamation, rumors, and gossip might actually start from facts, from things that did happen. But a speech not subjected to God will truncate the truth. You'll hear part of the story. Quickly, let's go to the fourth question. Can we talk about two people getting to know each other? A guy and a girl are chatting. Everyone assumes there's something there. What's wrong with talking about it? Imagine two cities that are not connected. They're trying to build a bridge so that they connect. They start building, but the people in both cities are impatient. Instead of waiting for the bridge to be finished, they start applying pressure on that bridge, on that yet unfinished bridge, by trying to use the bridge to cross over, despite the fact that it's still unfinished. What is wrong with trying to cross over the bridge, they say. That's what bridges are for. And the more people go on that unfinished bridge and try to cross over, the more pressure is being applied on that unfinished structure. And under enough pressure, it will collapse. In a similar way, two young people are trying to build a bridge. But some of you start asking about the ring before the two of them know their favorite colors. And you don't even think too much of the fact that you're talking about these things on day 4 of their friendship. What's wrong with asking about the ring? That's what relationships are about. But when you talk about these things before the time, you are applying pressure on an unfinished bridge. And then you wonder how come it collapsed. And you don't think too much of it, of your actions. But let's consider this for a second. We know that the enemy is attacking families. And looking at the divorce rate will make that clear. In addition to attacking existing families, the enemy tries to undermine the formation of new families. You don't believe me? Look at the data. By 2030, 45% of women aged 25 to 44 will be single and childless. By 2030, 45% of women aged 25 to 44 will be single and childless. Ladies, I'm in no way suggesting that you should say yes to the first guy who says I love you just because you're afraid of remaining single. Do your due diligence. But I'm sharing this information to make a point. The enemy is already fighting, is bent on preventing the formation of new families. So if we talk about young people who try to get to know each other, we add unnecessary pressure on that unfinished bridge, and that will cause it to collapse. And this in turn contributes to the enemy's plan of preventing the formation of new families. So instead of talking about young people trying to get to know each other, we should tame our tongue, especially given the importance and sanctity of marriage. Let's give people space. Let them be. Let's not rush them with this collective pressure. And I'll close with a 5th question. What are some practical things we can do to tame the tongue? I'll read James 3 verse 13 all the way to 18. Who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show by his good behavior his deeds in the gentleness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant and so lie against the truth. This wisdom is not that which comes down from above, but is earthly, natural, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every evil thing. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peace-loving, gentle, reasonable, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial, free of hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So, what's something we can do to tame our tongue? First, let's ask God to sanctify our hearts. James says, if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, there will be disorder and every evil thing. If we have these things in our hearts, our actions and speech will be impure. And we are under the influence of earthly, even demonic wisdom. Now, James is right. No person can tame the tongue while still under the influence of evil. As we saw earlier, Satan is behind harmful speech. Now, by contrast, it follows that God is the source of edifying and healing words. We cannot tame the tongue on our own. That's why we desperately need God's touch. We desperately need God to sanctify us. We need our selfish ambition to be replaced with self-sacrifice for the sake of others. The bitter jealousy needs to be replaced with contentment and happiness for other people's blessings. Arrogance needs to be replaced with humility, slander with blessings, gossips and defamation with courage to defend people. Once our heart is pure, our speech will also be pure. Second thing, let's think before we speak. As simple as that. Proverbs 15:28. The heart of the righteous ponders how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours out evil things. Let's not say the first thing that comes to mind. If I say this, will I hurt this person? Is this comment edifying? Am I glorifying God through my words right now? If I share these details, will that person's reputation be affected? And am I putting him or her in a bad light? Let's think before we speak. Third thing, set a different example at home. Dear parents, think of me as your own son. A quick, short, heart-to-heart conversation. It's going to be uncomfortable, but I'm afraid it's necessary. Dear parents, harmful speech is first tolerated at home. Why are we using the lunch or dinner time as an occasion to tell us what everyone in the church is doing or saying? Do we really have to do that? Why turn our home into a place where we share bad news about people instead of making it a place where we bless people? If gossip and defamation is tolerated at home, that's what I will also be inclined to do, because that's the model I see. We've seen that harmful speech will isolate me from godly people. So if godly people will avoid me, I will end up being around ungodly people. I know you don't want that for your child. So please, dear parents, let's get the gossip out of our houses. Dear mother, I am paying attention to what you're saying about others. Would you want me to follow in your footsteps? Can I share in public the things you say about people in private? Dear Father, please offer me a better example at home. Don't bring defamation at home. Live it out. If in a moment of weakness you hear someone in the family slandering someone, it is your holy duty as priest to correct that mistake. Dear Father, by the authority God has granted to you as the head of the family, as the head of the house, set a rule in our family. As for me and my house, we shall not gossip. As for me and my house, we shall not slander people. As for me and my house, we shall bless people. Please, Father, rise up to the occasion. Be the holy priest you are meant to be. Finally, we don't believe in gossip. We believe in sharing a testimony. And here I would like to ask, we believe in sharing a testimony and a blessing. Now, sometimes Pentecostals are inclined to chase after flashy gifts, but encouraging people and showing mercy are also gifts we must exercise. Romans 12:8, if your gift is to encourage, then give encouragement. And if it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully. When we are tempted to say something bad about someone, fight this by focusing on the good traits of that person. What are some things I appreciate about that person? Instead of going around and talking bad about people, go around and bless them. You know what was enough to keep me at this church? Thank you. A friend of mine came to me and said, thank you for what you're doing. I was very, very, very close to leaving. One of the reasons was gossip. That was the main reason. Gossip, it was just tearing apart. But a friend said, thank you. You don't really know how far a thank you, a blessing can go. Go around and say, I appreciate how dedicated you are. Go and say, thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I noticed you went out of your way to make me feel included. I appreciate that. Thank you for not giving up on me. Your counsel is to me like a map for the one trapped in a maze. I was in a dark place, entertaining bitter and vengeful thoughts, but your unwavering kindness diffused my hostile attitude. Go and tell others your empathy for others is like a flower in a deserted place. It gives hope to the weary heart. Go and tell people your laughter is to my heart like sunny days during a Seattle winter. Go and tell people the joy of the Lord looks good on you. Dear church, this is a call to repentance. We've all fallen short. We've all sinned. We've all misused our tongue. And I'm calling you tonight. Let's repent. Just as I had an invitation for the family, for the head of the house to say, as for me and my house, we shall not gossip but bless people. I have the same calling for the entire church. As for our community, we shall not gossip. As for our community, we shall bless people. So help us God.